Hey guys, so I'm here at San Diego Comic-Con and we just got a brand new 3-minute trailer for The Rings of Power. And I'm recording on the road in my hotel to break it down, check out the references, clues, and of course, theorize some of the mysteries within. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss your weekly dose of Tolkien here on Nerd of the Rings. We open this new trailer with Galadriel placing a helmet among what we see as a massive pile of elven helmets. In the wide shot, we see she's standing among a desolated area. There's trees burned to a crisp, and obviously whatever happened here, the body count was very high. Her voiceover says, "We thought the war at last was ended." Now the dialogue here, and my theories on the previous teaser, would make me think that we're seeing the aftermath of the 40-year War of Wrath. However, I have to note that the imagery this called to mind for me was the Howth in Nirnaeth, a mound of bodies of the men and elves killed in the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, a battle some 75 years earlier that's a devastating loss for the Free Peoples. Though this does seem to just be helmets and not the bodies themselves, so I don't think we can safely assume that's what we're seeing here. Next we get the previously released shot, which I'm now more convinced is Lindon, and it's followed up by shots of Elrond, Gil-galad, and Galadriel. As Gil-galad says, "Today our days of peace begin," Elrond looks on as Gil-galad places one of the leaf crowns on Galadriel's head. As for what we might be seeing here, I really only have guesses. With Gil-galad making the proclamation of peace, I get the sense that perhaps this is some kind of ceremony either in recognition of previous deeds or giving them some kind of other honor. We get an in-motion shot of the banquet scene where we definitely see Gil-galad, Celebrimbor, Elrond, and Durin IV. It's really hard to tell who's on the camera side of the table, and one figure in the middle is obscured, but I think it might be Galadriel. Speaking of whom, we get another Galadriel voiceover saying, "We thought our joy would be unending. We thought our light would never dim." During this, we have elven children playing in a field near a creek with what looks like a paper boat floating in the water. We get what looks like two men setting down the sail of a boat, and while it's intercut with elven shots, this looks more like a group of men to me, and I'm curious what this symbol could stand for. We get a slightly different angle of the shots of the birds flying toward the boat, and I think this likely confirms that the birds are originally coming from the same source as the light. We can't really make out anything in the light, but my best guess is that we're seeing the elves attempt the sailing to Valinor, the big canon characters of the show, to have satisfying arcs, and to see how they resemble their book counterparts. So I hope this doesn't lessen Gil-galad's importance in the series. Now on with the Palantir. Galadriel places her hand on it and we see ice breaking in the Seeing Stone. I don't think this is the stone itself actually cracking, but merely an indication of what Galadriel may be looking to. While this teaser may seem to indicate that this leads to flashbacks, I think that's just a creative decision for the trailer itself. And the flashbacks we get are of a large battle scene between elves and orcs. This is presumably the same battle we saw Finrod in one of the earlier teasers, and it also appears to be the battleground from the first shot of this trailer. The destroyed trees give off a similar vibe, so I'm thinking this is probably the same location. There's also explosions going off in this shot, which makes me wonder if we'll see something in particular causing these, or if they're just kind of there to convey chaos in a battle. There's some super quick shots of fighting with flames in the background, then this blink and you'll miss it shot of an orc in what looks like the same location we see Arondir in when he's presumably captured. And that shot fades pretty quickly into the previously released shot of Finrod in what appears to be the same battle. Next we get the floating bodies in the Sea of Red shot from the last teaser. I'm still wondering if this is the War of Wrath. It's really hard to tell what First Age battles might be depicted in the show because we seemingly have characters and references from a couple different ones going on right now. Next we get a dramatic shot of Galadriel standing over her fallen brother. Finrod has some pretty nasty scrapes on his arm, which, if we're assuming they go with the canon story, would have been inflicted by werewolves in the dungeons of Sauron during an incredibly important mission where Finrod meets his demise. We see here that he's holding the dagger that Galadriel holds in a lot of the promotional material. So perhaps she carries her brother's blade after his death, and what we've all assumed was Galadriel's dagger is actually Finrod's dagger. We see a close-up of Galadriel with a tear flowing down her cheek before cutting to our first glimpse of the White Tree of Nimloth, the Tree of Numenor, and the ancestor of the White Trees of Gondor. And just as I predicted in the last breakdown, it is indeed the white tree's petals that are falling that Muriel sees and turns around. It's cut to look like she's looking at the subjects in the next shot, but I'm still thinking she's looking at the petals and possibly finding this to be an ill omen. Next we see three figures, one with a staff, one holding some kind of circular plate coming over a hilltop. This shot is followed by, I think, the hooded one in the center turning their head. I'm pretty unsure who this could be, but I think we're certainly led to believe this could finally be Annatar, the fair form of Sauron. Though I have to say, he doesn't seem all that fair. The guy seems totally shady in this shot. I'm really not sure what to make of him, but over these shots we get the lines, "Evil does not sleep, it waits." So this trailer definitely wants us to think this is a main villain. Here we have some dwarven shots. Some we've seen, but here we have a new shot of the throne of Durin III, and he's telling his son, beyond the darkness, tempting shadow, to bury us all beneath the mountain. Next we see Galadriel, who seems like she's waking from maybe being knocked out based on the camera work, and as she rises, we see she's in the ruins of a town or a village that's been destroyed by fire. While I initially thought Galadriel looking like this, tied to the floating bodies footage, I now think this is a separate scene entirely, as we see it takes place in this village. Obviously, many would assume a dragon would cause devastation like this. After all, we've seen similar in the Hobbit films. However, I wonder if what we're seeing here is caused by what's sure to be the show stealer at the end of this trailer. Galadriel says he has not one name but many, as we get a creepy shot of this structure. I'm fairly certain this is in the frozen north of Middle-earth, where we've seen Galadriel traveling with other elves. As for what this fortress could be, the most exciting possibility is the ruins of Utumno, Morgoth's first fortress, which he used prior to his first capture by the Valar, and quite possibly where he first twisted elves into orcs. Next we have a shot of ice spreading on some kind of slab, and the symbol here totally matches the symbol on the mysterious broken black blade from the teaser posters. There's some kind of connection here, but the question is what? Speaking of the sword, the next shot is of Theo, the young man who is holding the broken blade in the promo images. He has an encounter with an old man who grabs his arm and asks if he's heard of Sauron. And this is the first time we've heard our big bad's name in any teasers or clips. I'm really curious to know where this is taking place and how this guy would know the name of Sauron himself, and why he's asking a child about the Dark Lord. I would have thought this would be somewhere in Harad, because I think that's where Theo is from, but this guy definitely doesn't look like he's from Harad. Unless, of course, this is perhaps some kind of Númenórean port within Harad. That might make a bit more sense. Now what's really interesting is that it seems perhaps Theo has some kind of brand on his arm. Could this be the result of handling the sword, which leads the old man to ask his question? Next, in one of my favorite portions of the trailer, we get Bronwyn hiding behind a door while an orc comes lurking in. It's so wonderfully creepy, and man, I just have to say thank God for practical effects orcs. We've got some great Weta designs we've seen, and having real actors in prosthetics is just awesome to see. Whatever's going on here, this scene seems wonderfully creepy. The next shot is one of those that's really curious, as the blade we've all thought to be broken or dissolved is shown to be reforming, and it gives off almost a reverse Morgul blade effect, though it also seems to have some fire elements to it. I'm still leaning Morgul blade on this one, but I'm definitely not 100% sure on that. Next we get a couple more shots of Galadriel and her group of elves, presumably searching the fortress we saw earlier, and she states, "If the evil rising is left unchecked, it will take us all." We see a group of about 7 elves walking into the fortress with their torches raised, followed by another shot of that frozen symbol on a piece of stone. I'm really curious to hear what you all think this might be a symbol of. Could it be that we're being tricked regarding its rotation and it's actually an eye? Next we've got elves with swords drawn, clearly ready to face something, when a huge frozen chunk gets hurled at them. While this is presumably the work of the snow troll, I noticed this isn't solid ice. It seems there's something metal within the ice that moves differently when a lot of the ice shatters. Next we get a quick shot of an explosion in what appears to be a Númenórean ship. And first I can't help but notice that we're getting quite a lot of explosions. It's not really something you expect much of in a Middle-earth adaptation, so it's kinda odd to see at least 3 shots of explosions in a single trailer. Now, I'm not the best about spotting actors when you don't have a good look at them, but to my eyes, this appears to be Elendil and Isildur running in along with a third person. Now, this third person could be one of Isildur's rumored friends we'll see in the show, but it's really hard to tell. We've got 2 quick shots of Theo and Bronwyn hugging, followed by a sinister figure walking among orcs who are bowing to him. I think these knuckles match what we saw in the teaser poster, and I'm fairly certain this is Adar, the leader of the orcs we'll see in Season 1. With the orcs, we can see that they all have these makeshift canopies, and their clothing seems like its sole purpose is to guard them from the sun, which is a feature I'm actually really looking forward to in the show. There's a reason it's kind of a big deal that Saruman's Uruks in the Third Age can withstand sunlight so well. Next, we see Halbrand making an entrance somewhere in Numenor, and there's all these little openings of candles behind him, and we get a bit more of a look at the Numenorean guard armor and shield. Overall, I think the designs of these guards is really solid, and I'm always a fan of the combination of blue and gold. Here we see Bronwyn yelling, "Together we can survive this," as Arondir looks on, followed by someone holding a sword up among a crowd of people. I really have no idea what's going on here, but it just kind of adds to the general mood of there being darkness coming back to Middle-earth and people fighting against it. Next, we get a slightly different shot of the elves drawing their swords, and again, I think this very well could be the Oath of Feanor we're seeing. There's definitely at least 5 guys here, and that theory is still by far my frontrunner. Next, we have a shot of Galadriel boarding a boat with some Numenorians standing by as her voiceover says, "Fight with me." And she takes what I believe is Muriel's hand in seeming alliance. It's way too early for them to be fighting Sauron directly, so I can't help but wonder what this conflict is they're going for. It also makes me wonder how this storyline is playing out, and how it's going to in any way connect to the canon story we know it should work toward. Here we have Arondir jump down onto a walkway and kick off a stone, possibly leading to the next shot where a bunch of orcs are taken out. My assumption here is that this is part of a fight scene as a result of the orcs marching upon his tower as we saw in the last teaser. Next is a quick shot of Muriel. Again, the white petals are falling, though now she looks like she's in some more formal attire, and I must say design-wise, I'm definitely more of a fan of the bluefish scale design as opposed to the brownish whitish that we've seen before. Maybe it's because I like blue, but I just think it looks really sharp paired with the gold. Here we have a shot of Disa singing and a group of dwarves, both male and female, around her. We saw an elven ceremony earlier, and this appears to be one of the dwarves. Dorn the Fourth holds up what I believe is a solid chunk of mithril once again, followed by a quick shot of Arondir and Bronwyn, and then we get a wider shot of the cavalry charge with Galadriel leading a bunch of Numenorians. And since it came out in an image release, I thought I'd mention I don't see Muriel's gold sun helmet in this shot, so I'm hoping that means she doesn't actually fight in it. I think the huge and kind of gaudy helm could work if you're using it to demonstrate the arrogance of Numenor, but the helmet itself just looked really out there to me. It definitely didn't seem like something one would wear while fighting. Next up, we get a shot of those awesome practical effects orcs running through the forest. And I think I'm beginning to connect some dots here. If I had to guess, I think Arondir's tower gets attacked, and perhaps he escapes into the woods, which is where these orcs are chasing him before he eventually gets captured. Next, we get a glimpse of Galadriel immediately post-shipwreck, and there's some huge water creature jumping overhead. Now, in case you're wondering, we don't really hear anything about water creatures in Middle-earth, but there is an interesting nugget in the Lost Road and other writings, where we find sea serpents are mentioned briefly, and where we find they are actually a breed of dragon. Next, as we see the Numenorians and the dwarves looking battle-ready, we get a line from Dorn the Third saying, "There can be no trust between hammer and rock. Eventually, one or the other must surely break." Is he speaking of some evil everyone is concerned with? Or could he actually be referring to the elves, perhaps even specifically Celebrimbor? We get a couple more shots of Meteor Man, this time confirming it is Nori we saw holding his arm as the swirl of rock and fire goes around them. And this leads into a few shots of Arondir fighting against orcs. One where he jumps through the air to stab one that appears to have a staff of some sort, and another where he's pushed off a ledge. Incidentally, I flippin' love the orc design of this particular one. It looks really good and really sinister. Next, we have a shot of a town, and Galadriel's there and seems to close her eyes, almost like she's accepting death. I'm pretty sure this is the same town we see utterly destroyed later when Galadriel is caked with dust. How she survived when it seemed nobody else did's hard to say, but something clearly catastrophic happens here. And here we are nearing the end with a shot of the mysterious person dressed in white, blowing sparks from his hand, and we see a leaf float through the air, As a voice says, "You have been told many lies of Middle-earth." This line is one that screams Annatar. It just sounds like something he would say when attempting to lead others astray and manipulate them. Then we see Arondir, huffing and puffing from fighting as a tree hand grabs his shoulder and pulls him back. Obviously, the most logical thing here is this would be an Ent, and since we definitely know Ents will be in the show, that's what my money's on. Then we get the title screen, but it doesn't end there. One last stinger we get is the reveal of a Balrog, which honestly shocked me when I saw it for many reasons. For one, I didn't expect the reveal of such a creature in a teaser, and for another, the design looks just like the one from the Peter Jackson films. It's so dead on, I can't help but wonder if something was worked out between the studios for them to use the same design. Although I will note, I do not see any wings on this one, so I'm curious if we'll see our first ever wingless Balrog in cinematic form. I don't know what the situation is here, but this certainly is an attention grabber. And while I initially thought the previous shot of the leaf burning might be some kind of summoning of the Balrog, now I wonder if that mysterious person is in fact the Balrog and is merely taking on this different form. It's hard to tell what's going on, to be honest. This Balrog shot could very well be creatively cut to not reveal it's actually during a First Age battle. Seeing multiple Balrogs on screen together fighting in one of the Great Wars would definitely be exciting to see. Now that we have a full trailer, my curiosity is certainly piqued, and I'm sure I'll have many more thoughts during tonight's live from Comic-Con stream, so be sure you tune into that. I mentioned most of the dialogue from this trailer, but didn't dive too deep into any of it because a lot of it just seems pretty boilerplate generic lines that you could find in anything talking good versus evil. Hopefully we'll get some clips of scenes as the show nears to get a better sense of actual conversations in this show. I'm pumped about seeing the Palantiri at work. I'm loving the practical orc suits, and I'm very curious about the mysterious shrouded figure and whether that could truly be Annatar. So what do you guys think? Are you pumped to see a Balrog again? Do you think this character could be Annatar, or do you think the design is a bit too Voldemort and possibly another red herring? Let me know what you think in the comments.